Welcome, my friend. Come in and make yourself comfortable by the fire. I'm embarrassed that my butler wasn't able to meet you at the gate. I'm afraid we'll be supping alone this evening. It's Bram Stoker's night to howl. Please forgive the minor theatrics. I simply can't resist a good scare. Frankly, my friend, these affected atmospherics, as startling as they can be, grow rather pale in the light of the story I am about to reveal. You have asked for the truth about Dracula, the monster most feared, whose restless soul has haunted generations. I must warn you, however, the truth about Dracula, about Vlad the Impaler, the Great Undead, is not for the timid. But my manners. Apologies, dear friend. Something to relieve a parched throat, perhaps. White? Red. Good. Like the tightly locked door at the top of the darkened stairway in the classic horror movies, Dracula's legend stands before us, daring us to investigate. I, like you, have always been fascinated with Dracula. The curiosity that brings you here tonight led me to ask the same questions. Why has the Dracula legend intrigued us so many generations? Could it be his triumph over mortality? His hypnotic power over victims, the elegance of this gentleman killer, or the sheer thrill of being scared to death? Well, perhaps all of these elements combined have made Dracula the most popular character in the history of horror, inspiring hundreds of writers and filmmakers. But I caution you to approach this evening with more respect than one would have for an ordinary fictional character. For there is more truth than fiction in the story of Vlad Dracula. Though a legend surrounds him, I assure you that such a man actually lived over 400 years ago in the mountains of Transylvania, a very real country in the heart of Europe. Here, in fact, in this town of Shigashiwara, the real Dracula, Vlad Dracula, began a legend that would endure the centuries. A brass plaque still announces the fact to passers-by. In this house, Vlad Dracula was born. And now the truth, my friend. Travel back with me to 15th century Transylvania. Those were turbulent times for Transylvania and for its neighboring region, Wallachia, which was ruled by Dracul, the father of Dracula. It was the height of the bloody and brutal holy wars, and the Islamic Turks had sworn to wipe out Christianity. This made the Turks mortal enemies of Vlad's people. For many of his teenage years, Vlad was held captive by the Turks. When his father was murdered by dissenters in his own country, young Vlad, less than 20 years old, escaped and joined troops on a crusade against his enemies. Within a few years, he had led several successful missions and was rewarded by his people with the same title his father had held, Crown Prince of Wallachia. Thus began a rise to power unlike any other in history. Vlad first decided to assert his newfound power within his own country. He issued proclamations from his long table with a clear message for the boyars: submit or die. Innocence was a question decided by only one man, Vlad Dracula. In one day, some 500 nobles were impaled on stakes in the hills surrounding the city. Few dared to stand up against him again. From then on, Dracula was known as Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler. And within a very short time, Dracula was undeniably the leader of his people. Secure in his own region, Dracula now turned towards Transylvania with an army 20,000 strong. The warning sounds were sent out. Vlad Tepes is coming. Vlad the Impaler is on the attack. No one knew where or when he would strike, but the tales of his tortures preceded him. In a papal letter sent to the Vatican, his atrocities were described. He killed some by breaking them under the wheels of carts. Others, stripped of their clothes, were skinned alive. Others placed upon stakes or roasted on red-hot coals. Others punctured with stakes, piercing their heads, their breasts, their buttocks, and the middle of their entrails, with the stake emerging from their mouths. The Transylvanians tried to take refuge behind the secure walls of monasteries, but nothing could stop the bloodthirsty Vlad Dracula. It was during this time that this famous scene occurred, with Vlad dining at a table amongst the impaled bodies of his countless victims. By late 1461, Dracula, unquestionably in command of his homeland, decided to do battle with his old enemies, the Turks. In a series of surprise raids, and with the advanced stories of his treacherous ways spreading panic throughout the Turkish forces, Vlad secured victory after victory. Within an amazingly short period of time, he had achieved the impossible. Leaving a bloody trail of conquered Turkish villages behind them, Vlad and his troops reached the Black Sea. This was a highly symbolic accomplishment, and those who choose to remember only those victories still call Vlad Dracula a hero. But Dracula's success was short-lived. Taking the matter somewhat more seriously, the Turkish Sultan sent 200,000 troops into Transylvania. Against these odds, Dracula was forced to retreat towards Wallachia. He had no choice but to return to his castle, but Vlad wasn't alone. The Sultan sent a battery of troops after him, and Dracula's mighty castle was destroyed. Dracula, however, escaped through a secret tunnel with a few friends and fled to Hungary. 12 years later, Vlad Dracula was finally killed by the Turks at this spot, Snagov. The Sultan ordered that Vlad's head be returned to him as proof of his demise. The monks at Snagov buried Dracula's headless body in their monastery. Some say he lives on. Truthfully, I am appalled at the treatment dealt him at the hands of today's Western culture. It must sadden him to be reduced to a mathematical puppet for preschoolers, a gaudy waxen caricature in cheap chambers of horrors. Why, his name has even been associated with a sugar-saturated breakfast cereal. This is an insult to Vlad the Impaler, hero to his people, and the very image of Satan to his enemies. The true, terrifying history of Dracula is found in no less a shrine than the British Museum. This in itself stands as a tribute to this master politician, statesman, warrior, and all-round benevolent dictator. Of course, every head of state has been prone to excess, and every head of state has his own peculiar tastes, whether for jelly beans, peanuts, or blood. 400 years after his death, Dracula found new life. It was Bram Stoker, an Irish novelist, who first introduced the Dracula legend to English literature. His research into the historical Vlad Dracula was painstaking, if you'll permit the pun. It was Stoker who changed Vlad from a bloodthirsty prince to a bloodthirsty vampire. Listen to Stoker's vivid description of a first meeting with the Count in his 1897 novel, Dracula. The driver suddenly turned down a narrow road, which turned sharply to the right. Soon we were hemmed in with trees, which in places arched right over the roadway, till we passed as though through a tunnel. Just then, the moon, sailing through the black clouds, appeared behind the jagged crest of a beetling, pine-clad rock. And by its light, I saw around us a ring of wolves with white teeth and lolling red tongues, with long, sinewy limbs and shaggy hair. All at once, the wolves began to howl. The horses jumped about and reared, and we kept on ascending. Suddenly, I was conscious of the fact that the driver was in the act of pulling up the horses in the courtyard of a vast, ruined castle, from whose tall black windows came no ray of light. What kind of a place had I come to? And among what kind of people? I heard a heavy step approaching behind the great door and saw through the chinks the gleam of a coming light. Then there was the sound of rattling chains and the clanking of massive bolts drawn back. A key was turned with the loud grating noise of long disuse, and the great door swung back. Within stood a tall old man, clad in black from head to foot, without a single speck of color about him anywhere. The old man motioned me in with his right hand with a courtly gesture, saying in excellent English, but with a strange intonation, "Welcome to my house. Enter freely and of your own will." He made no motion of stepping to meet me, but stood like a statue, as though his gesture of welcome had fixed him into stone. The instant, however, that I had stepped over the threshold, he moved impulsively forward. I said interrogatively, "Count Dracula?" He bowed in a courtly gesture as he replied, "I am Dracula. I bid you welcome. It is late and my people are not available. Let me see to your comfort myself." Well, from your expression, I can see that Dracula still isn't real to you. Well, can you begin to believe it? Can you imagine, for instance, that Bram Stoker's Castle Dracula might have existed? Well, it did. To ensure the strength of his reign, once and for all, Dracula used Easter, the most sacred of Orthodox holidays, as a trap. He encouraged a festive gathering of nobles and peasants on Easter morning, and then surrounded and captured them all. The old and sick were impaled and placed like fence posts around the city, while the young, healthy citizens were taken, still in their Easter costumes, and forced to work on the construction of Castle Dracula. They were fed as little as possible and worked until the clothes fell off their backs. No one knows how many years the construction took. No one knows how many died. He had built a perfect retreat, closer to Transylvania, in a difficult spot to attack. Deep in the Carpathian Mountains, perched securely on a lofty crag, lies Castle Dracula. Today it stands in ruin, silent save for the moaning wind that echoes through its silhouetted majesty. One can only imagine the height of its battlements and the depth of its secrets. Oh yes, Castle Dracula was real, and to the Transylvanians so were vampires. The ornate frescoes on these old Transylvanian church walls tell the story of vampirism. According to tradition, should a man change his religion from Eastern Orthodox to Roman Catholicism, as Vlad Dracula did, he was excommunicated and upon death became a vampire. These drawings are vivid in detail, depicting the restless souls of the undead rising out of their graves. So, the legend has some basis in fact. The potential of such rich drama was quickly discovered by a young, booming film industry, both in Europe and Hollywood. The Dracula legend found new life in 1922 with the release of a German film entitled Nosferatu. Now, director Friedrich Murnau unfortunately could not secure the necessary copyrights from Mr. Stoker, so he changed things slightly. Transylvania became the Baltic states, Count Dracula became Count Orlok, but essentially Nosferatu was the first of over 200 movies to contribute to Dracula lore. I have a copy of the film ready in the viewing room. Would you care to have a look at Dracula's first starring role? Oh, good. They just don't make them like this anymore. And it's a good thing, too. The actor is Max Schreck. His Count Orlok bears little resemblance to the elegant devils of later Hollywood and London versions. Though vampire stories had been translated to the screen as early as 1909, this film was an adaptation of Stoker's novel and is considered the first Dracula vampire movie. Even today, Nosferatu remains a masterpiece of horror. I just love a good romance. Kind of brings a lump to the throat, doesn't it? But the story gets better with every telling, as each element is added to the tale. The fangs, the black silk cape, the hypnotic eyes, even the myth that a vampire casts no reflection in a mirror. The vampire Dracula is a development of the ancient legends, and it's surprising how many similarities exist between the blood-sucking undead of Dracula's time and the modern fictionalized vampire of today. There are the common, well-known myths, of course. Should one wish to remain totally prepared in case of vampire attack, I have assembled a small vampire emergency kit. Oh, yes. Here is the first item, garlic. And pungent it is. The mere presence of this deliciously smelly herb will keep away the vampire, and for that matter, anyone else except a very dedicated apprentice chef. Now, the Transylvanians used to smear the fresh-cut cloves of garlic about their doorways and window sashes. The cross, of course, has always been the absolute power over vampires. Its shape has defended many a film star from the fangs of Dracula. And here is the traditional wooden stake. Though it may seem to be a movie cliche, the wooden stake has more than a literary association with vampires, as I will later explain. Now, here are two tiny little bandages, just the right size. Guess you know what they're for. Now, this is something you may not have seen. It is a small replica of a tawaka. The real thing is much bigger, of course, and when struck, the very sound of it scares off every vampire within hearing distance. Now, I'm no expert, of course, so perhaps a proper demonstration would be in order. In Romania, the sounding of the tawaka is a ritual performed by the priests several times each day. Now, should you not succeed in scaring off the vampire, you must certainly destroy it at the earliest opportunity. There are specific instructions as to how to accomplish this. They are given in Romanian, so please allow me to translate. We bury the vampires away outside the village, up in the mountains by themselves, or at a crossroads far away from here. Nobody is safe from the vampire. So whenever strange things happen, you suspect right away that it's a vampire. The first thing to do is to go out and look at the graves in the cemetery. You look for freshly turned dirt or some other sign that a grave has been disturbed. You have to do this during the day. Vampires aren't dangerous during the day, only at night. That's when they come out to suck people's blood and make them sick and put a curse on people. So you go out to the cemetery in the daytime. If you see signs, you have to open up the grave and kill them. In some places, they kill a vampire by cutting off its head. The surest way to kill a vampire is by driving a stake through his heart. The stake has to be driven right through the vampire's body into the ground. But if you don't find him and kill him, he remains undead. Vampires are no quaint legend, nor is Dracula a theatrical character created through actors and special effects. No, he is terribly real. Certainly, Hollywood has contributed much to the Western image of the Count. Many great men have played Dracula on the stage and screen. Most of them were my friends, though I somehow never had the opportunity to play the King of Evil. Maybe it's just as well. There are many classic film portrayals which have mixed fact with fantasy to create the popular image of Count Dracula. Over the years, many vampire movies have featured female vampires, but none compares with the nightmarish Vampire, directed by Carl Dreyer in 1932. In this artistically acclaimed film, Dreyer presents his vampire as an ugly, old, witch-like woman. The horror is further enhanced by Dreyer's imaginative use of the camera. Such techniques as shooting through gauze to create a dreamlike haze are still used by filmmakers to this day. This 1936 Dracula sequel, Mark of the Vampire, incorporated all the classic elements. The spooky castle, the cobwebs, the dim candlelight, the eerie music, the pretty young girl, and of course, the most famous of all the Hollywood Draculas, Bela Lugosi.
By day, the vampires must return to the ground in which they were buried, or else find shelter in some accursed retreat. It is then they are powerless.
Then we must leave at daybreak. It's our chance to get away from here.
What? And leave these monsters here to continue their work of destruction? It would be cowardice.
What else is there to do?
Search for them. Find their corpse-like bodies. It is in that state, and that state only, they can be destroyed. Their heads must be severed with one clean stroke and a sprig of bat thorn placed within the gaping wound.
They would be crazy to attempt what you are planning. I'll never do it. Never. In the morning we're leaving. I agree with you.
Mark of the Vampire starred some very famous actors. Yes, that is Lionel Barrymore.
In 3 hours, it will be daylight. Thank heaven the house is well protected for the night.
Ah, the classic Dracula pose, but not the classic ending.
This vampire business has given me a great idea for a new act. Luna, in this new act, I will be the vampire. Did you watch me? I gave all of me. I was greater than any real vampire.
Sure. But get off your makeup.
Yes, and help me with some of this packing.
I've seen sick men before. Now, I know about men.
Perhaps the most unwilling vampire in film history was John Beale as Dr. Beecher in the 1957 movie simply entitled The Vampire.
You told me yourself these pills were from vampire bats.
Exactly, but Paul, that doesn't make you another Dracula. You found a strong suggestive influence there, that's all.
You think so?
It's my opinion you need a complete rest.
Well, you're wrong, Will.
Look, Paul, people depend on you here. I don't want to see you destroy your life. It's a useful life, Paul. I don't want to see you destroy it over an hallucination like this.
Oh, hallucination.
But suppose it is. Look, suppose you confess to that killing last night. Paul, you'll never be able to pick up your work here again. It's a small town, Paul. It's a small town. People...
Delving into the world of science fiction rather than straight horror, The Vampire tells the story of a doctor who unintentionally takes vampire pills.
11?
Yeah, that seems to be the hour. That's as long as I can go without the pills.
Now, nonsense. All right, Paul, I'll keep you from taking the pills. Now, you can trust me. I'll stay with you until 11 o'clock.
So I'm right. There is a killer. How'd he do it?
Well, it seems that this maniac extracts a small amount of blood from his victims' throats. And then, because he carries the disease virus in his saliva, he transmits it to them. But for some reason, he remains immune himself.
Oh, come on, Will. Help me. I gotta have him. I can't do it. I can't wait like this. Can't you see what's happening to me?
I can't see any different except your state of mind. Now try to bear it just a little longer.
Oh, I can't. You gotta help me.
Look, I'm going to give you the sedative, Paul, in just a few minutes.
I need it now. Please. Please. Oh, please.
Doomed to taking lives by night and saving them by day. Ah, the dramatic irony. Having accidentally attained immortality, this pathetic character wants more than anything to die and to end his nightmare. In 1961, actor Francis Lederer had his chance to portray the Prince of Darkness in Curse of Dracula, also called Return of Dracula. This time, the vampire comes to America for his evil pursuits. Using the name of Balak Godal, he presents himself to the unsuspecting family of Cora Maybury, claiming that he is her long-lost cousin from Eastern Europe.
The cross is my enemy, Rachel. Take it off. Take off the cross, Rachel, then we can speak. I must speak with you.
What?
The cross. You will do as I say.
Yes.
Obviously influenced by Bela Lugosi, Lederer is careful not to carry the resemblance too far, choosing a simple, dark business suit for his vampire attire.
Are you afraid?
No.
I bring you the darkness of centuries past and centuries to come. Eternal life and eternal death. Now do you fear?
Again. Get up, will you, Rachel? Gotta help Mom finish making the costume.
Out of the way.
No, you must listen to me. You must listen to what I say. You shall not leave. You are bound to me. You shall die as you are bidden to die.
Get out of the way!
All right, we're all right.
Don't look, honey, he's gone.
Ah, the imagination of the filmmaker. And who better in this age of cinematic miracles to perpetuate the evils of Vlad Dracula? But in this, as in all things, truth is stranger than fiction. From Bram Stoker down to today's characterizations of the prince, none has ever succeeded in even approaching the horrible truth of Vlad the Impaler. Even our most famous portrayals of Dracula fall short of the terror expressed in a 15th century portrait of the real Vlad Dracula. The artist is unknown, and so is his fate. Now you know what captured Bram Stoker's imagination. You understand the significance of Dracula and the wooden stake. Why little children in Romania are warned to be good, or Dracula will get them. Much more influential than the threat that Santa might not bring a gift, don't you think? But there is much more you don't yet understand, more strange truths you have yet to hear. What could be stranger than the truth of Dracula's past, Dracula's present? To the people of Romania, still isolated from the modern world, Dracula and his legend live on. The stories play an important part in their lives. You see, my friend, Dracula does exist today. Where? Where else? In Transylvania. You seem to scoff at the truth. I beg you, do not leap to conclusions until you have heard the whole story. For stranger things are still to come. Come to a remote village in the Carpathian Mountains of Transylvania. Not 15th century Transylvania, when Vlad Dracula led his bloodthirsty raids, but Transylvania today, where his legend still lives on. Here, a man has died. His body lies in state in his home, awaiting the funeral tomorrow morning. And outside, the villagers have gathered to perform an exorcism, an age-old ritual complete with wailing and fires and homemade masks to ward off evil, to ward off the vampires. To these villagers, this is a serious, one could say, life or death matter. If they succeed, the soul of their friend will leave his body and rise to heaven. If not, he could become a vampire, joining the Great Undead, destined to return and promote evil in their community. One double-sided mask shows the effigy of the historical decapitated Dracula on one side and the traditional vampire with hollow eyes, pale skin, and bloodied mouth on the other. Dracula, the Great Undead. By the first light of morning, fear dwindles, but not precaution. Every care is taken to prepare the man's grave properly. In the graveyard, markers tell the story of how others in the village died. Here we see how this shepherd was murdered and then decapitated so that the victim could never come back to haunt his murderer. Such traditions still prevail. To these people, there is no greater fear than the fear of the undead returning. A hole is cut in the sheet covering the corpse. The lid of the wedge-shaped coffin is carefully laid on top, but no nails hold it in place. The grave is shallow.
Al Fiului și al Sfântului Duh, acum și pururea și în vecii vecilor. Amin.
These procedures make it easier for the villagers to detect any signs of unnatural life. Should anything around the grave be disturbed, they will see it and react accordingly. One can never be sure. Despite the greatest precautions, a person may be destined to become a vampire. And so it is that these creatures lurk in the villages of Romania, or so the peasants believe. And that's why their ritual extends past the cemetery into their daily life. As everyone knows, vampires hate garlic. So all that is precious to these people is protected by this herb. The livestock, and of course, the home. All possible entrances are covered. The windows and doors, even the chimney and keyholes. One can't be too well protected. The ceremonial mask reveals the two faces of Dracula, uniting two legends, the hero of Romania, the crusader, and the vampire, the Great Undead. Silly superstitions? Well, many have thought so. And many have attempted to disprove the legends through more practical and physical evidence of the life of Dracula. As you have seen, the historical proof of the existence of this prince of blood has served mostly to substantiate the legend of evil. And as every detail is unearthed, each seems to match a portion of the legend. Perhaps the most astounding evidence was supplied by an archaeological expedition mounted in 1936. In that year, scientists traveled to Transylvania, to the monastery of Snagov, to Vlad Dracula's grave, in search of the final truth. Today, Snagov is a gloomy place with only traces of its 15th century magnificence. Rich in legend, there are peasants here who say they've seen the ghost of Dracula rising from the lake. Who knows how many prayers and prisoners, famous people and infamous acts these walls have witnessed through the centuries? Who knows how many secrets lie buried here? Professor Dino Rossetti was among the scientists who made that pilgrimage in 1936 here to Snagov. To this day, he is reluctant to discuss his findings. More than 40 years have passed since I conducted my archaeological work here at Snagov. Tradition said that the grave of Dracula, the grave of Vlad the Impaler, was located here. Here in this part of the monastery, I had the opportunity to examine the grave. There was nothing to indicate that the grave had been disturbed or profaned. When the grave and the coffin were opened, I found that the clothing was well preserved and in quite good condition. a red silk garment with the arms folded across the chest, but to our absolute amazement, the body had completely disappeared from inside the clothes. Only the clothing was there, without a trace of the body. Where is the body of Dracula? The body of the Impaler? The body of the Great Undead? Truth is an interpretation of facts, whether those facts be real or imagined. To the people of Romania, for the past 500 years, Vlad Dracula has existed as truth. The horrors of history lend credence to his legend. The people meld vampires, demons, and religious beliefs with the legend. The novelist mixes these elements with a fertile imagination and a dramatic flair, et voila, Count Dracula in all his glory. The prince's psychotic, twisted mind served a purpose for the people of Romania against the Turks. And his evil proves to be barbaric only in the light of the knowledge of successive generations. Well, I've told you the facts. It is up to each of you to interpret these facts and determine your own truth. Well, it's dawn already. How the time has flown. Well, I've enjoyed this evening very much. But I'm afraid our little chat must come to an end. Oh, Bram Stoker should be back by now. He will show you out. Good morning.